Welcome to the Valley Avon Podcast, a weekly podcast provided by Valley Community Baptist Church, located in Avon, Connecticut.
What do you think about trash talking? Fortunately, the Wharton School of Business at UPenn has studied what trash talking is and what the outcomes of trash talking are. In case you don't know what trash talking is, they've written an elaborate, very business school sounding definition. Trash talking consists of boastful comments about the self or insulting comments about an opponent that are delivered by a competitor, typically before or during a competition. They did summarize this definition a bit, and they came to call it just competitive incivility, I think is the term that they chose to use. And they discovered that sometimes trash talking can be beneficial. It's motivating. Sometimes trash talking can actually be destructive. Trash talking, of course, has made its way to the Olympics, to the Olympic swimming pool even. You may know that the United States and Australia are swimming rivals. Well, it turns out that last year, an Australian swimmer went on Australian television and was trash talking about the United States. She said on Australian television that one of the best things about beating the United States at any meet was that the Australians didn't have to listen to the Star-Spangled Banner. Apparently, they don't like our national anthem. And she said that the rivalry has been fueled by the fact that the Americans, when the Americans get out of the warm-up pool to go to the competition pool, American athletes ring cowbells to encourage, to cheer on their teammates. I guess the Australians don't like cowbells. So this interview was played for American athletes getting ready for the Olympics this year. In fact, the swimming goat himself, Michael Phelps, they showed him the clip and asked Michael Phelps, if you were still swimming for the United States and you saw this clip, what would you do? And Michael Phelps said, I would play that clip every day because it would make me train harder and swim harder. And that's the thing about trash talking. It motivates us in competition. In a sense, though, trash talking is everywhere. Trash talking is pretty much a part of any type of competition. If there's a competition, trash talking is probably not going to be far behind. It's a part of sports. It's a part of business. It's even a part of politics. But trash talking really is just one other type of incivil dialogue that happens in our culture. It's part of what's going on where people are bragging, where people are insulting, where people are talking harshly about one another. That kind of talk has actually become pervasive in our society. And this harsh talking about and to one another leaves us all feeling off balance and a little bit frustrated with a culture that seems to be going awry. But then you want to ask the question, okay, who's to blame? It's really easy to cast blame for the incivil discussions that we have in our culture. Some people will say, well, it's the media's fault. Some people will say, wait, no, it's not the media, it's the social media's fault. It's the tech company's fault. Because we see trash talking everywhere. The thing is that trash talking and all kinds of other forms of harsh discussion, of insults, it's entertaining. And so we watch what they put out. And when we watch it, we become acclimatized to it. We become used to it. And if we watch trash talking enough, usually we become trash talkers ourselves. And so as we ask the question about harsh discussions in our culture, who is to blame? We have to ask the question, are we to blame, at least in part? And if we are to blame, we would want to know, where did we go wrong? And James tells us today where we may have gone wrong if our dialogue is out of control. He tells us that we may have selected the wrong kind of wisdom. In the reading that we have today before us in the book of James, we discover that there are different kinds of wisdom, and James is even going to imply that some things that sound like wisdom, some things that pass themselves off as wisdom, aren't actually wise. And James is going to give us keys that are going to help us to recognize when something that sounds like it's wise isn't really. And James is going to show us again and again and again that what we as Christians have available to us leads to better ways of thinking, better ways of talking, better ways of behaving. Because James is going to remind us again that Christian faith works. But as we look at James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18 today, we're going to find first that wisdom is demonstrated by its fruit. James begins to explore this in verses 13 and 14, where he writes, "Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth." So James is asking a really good question here at the beginning. Who is wise and understanding among you? It's an important question because at first we all assume we know who's wise and understanding. It seems obvious who's wise and understanding, doesn't it? It's obvious that the person who's smart or who sounds smart and who's able to quickly express an opinion, that's the one who is wise and understanding. Except we all kind of know that that's maybe really not the case. Who's wise and understanding? Who's wise and understanding and expressing an opinion? Who's wise and understanding in your family? Who's wise and understanding in your circle of friends? Who's wise and understanding at work? Who's wise and understanding in government, in politics, in opinions in society? Is it the person who sounds really smart and is able to express their opinion first? Is that the one who's wise? Who really is wise and understanding? It's a critical question for us to ask because we are inundated with messages that purport to be wisdom and knowledge. We are inundated every day by claims. This is news. This is a view. It's important. This is important for you to look at. We are overwhelmed by these messages. But here's the interesting thing, that the rise of the age of social media has democratized news, fact, and opinion. And what does that mean? That means that anyone, anywhere can post something and say, this is news, this is truth, this is the way things ought to be. And there's no filter on it. There's no one asking the question, is this thing true? Is this thing really wise? All those opinions are just out there. All those so-called facts are just out there. All that stuff that purports to be news is just out there, which means that it falls to us to filter that stuff. We have to filter the inputs, the many inputs that are coming to us. It can be overwhelming. It can be frustrating. We have to filter all that stuff ourselves, and that means asking the question, who and what is really wise, and who and what is really understanding? James says, if you want to know who's really wise and what's really represents good understanding, look at the fruit, look at the produce of that wisdom, look at the produce of that understanding. James has already said to us, if you want to see somebody's faith, it's going to come out in their works. But now he adds, if you want to see someone's wisdom, look at the works of that wisdom. Look at what that wisdom does. Don't assume that just because something sounds good, it sounds wise, it sounds smart, that it's going to be wise and smart and full of understanding. Look at the outcomes. Look at the produce. Look at the works of that supposed wisdom. Because things that sound smart aren't always smart. Consider, for instance, the introduction of cane toads to Australia. Cane toads sounded like a really good idea to address a really big problem. The big problem was that the people of Australia wanted to be able to grow sugarcane in the 19th century. Their climate looked like they should be able to grow sugarcane, and tests proved that sugarcane would indeed grow where they were. It'd be a great crop for farmers. But as farmers started planting sugarcane, there were beetles and their larvae that kept eating the roots of the sugarcane. It threatened the whole industry. And so the farmers turned to the government, and they said, "You've got to do something about it." So the government set up an agency to study the problem and come up with a solution. An Australian scientist in the 1930s went to Puerto Rico and found a miracle cure, a toad that would eat the beetles that ate the roots of the sugarcane and eat the larvae as well. Came back to Australia with the news. A few years later, another Australian scientist came back to Australia with a breeding pair of cane toads. Within months, there were thousands of cane toads in Australia. They released them into the wild, into the environment. But nobody thought to ask two very important questions. One, do cane toads actually eat the beetles that eat the sugarcane roots? And two, what will cane toads do in Australia's environment? And it turns out cane toads don't like the beetles and the larvae that eat sugarcane. And even better, it turns out that while they may not eat the beetles, they do like to reproduce, and they're very good at that, and they're poisonous, and they wreck the natural environment in Australia. So now, instead of a solution to their sugarcane problem, the Australians have an invasive, poisonous, nature-wrecking pest on their hands that's spreading across the country. See, sometimes an idea that sounds good doesn't work out. Well, James is really giving us a thought to lock our minds onto today, and the thought is this: if the fruit is bad, the root is bad. If the idea sounds good, but the product is bad, the idea is bad. If the wisdom sounds wise, but it leads to a bad outcome, it's not really wisdom. Wisdom is measured by its fruit. It's measured by its outcome, by the produce of that supposed wisdom. We're going to go on to discover then that wisdom, so-called, and that means dismissive air quotes, wisdom, dismissive air quotes, so-called, is not always wise. And as we continue into verses 15 and 16, James is going to call different types of question actually into question different types of wisdom. He says, this is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For while jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. Now, when you wrap in verse 14, James has given us 4 warning signs that the wisdom that we're looking at, so-called, dismissive air quotes, is not really wise. Warning sign number 1 is bitter jealousy. Now, the phrase that's translated in our text as bitter jealousy starts with the word for zeal. The word for zeal means, in Greek, what it means in our language, which it means a passion. We know about passions that some can be good. For instance, a passion for, a zeal for justice and for God. Some zeals can be neutral or unimportant, like a zeal for food. And some zeals and passions can be downright destructive. And James tells us, if you want to understand the difference really between different types of zeal, well, you look at this second thing. Does it produce bitterness? The word that is bitterness in Greek actually implies a biting. And so if your zeal causes a biting, if it does damage, if it causes bitterness in you and does damage in you, or causes bitterness in another and does damage in them, then it's not actually a wisdom. It's very likely that this is something other than wisdom that comes from God. The second warning sign is actually selfish ambition. And the word translated as selfish ambition here started really well in the ancient languages. It was the word for day laborer. But it came to mean a day laborer who would go into the fields and work that day because they had to have the wages from that day in order to live. So it came to mean someone who works not for the joy of working or for the outcomes, but just to earn a wage. From there, the word migrated in the language to stand for politicians and for leaders who were leading for their own ego, for their own interest, instead of for the interests of the country or of the organization. From there, it's a very short distance to see that this word becomes a simple selfishness that we have that is seeking our own good. And James is saying, if there's a selfishness in your heart seeking your own good, then that's not true wisdom. James turns from the heart to the outcomes there with the third warning sign, which is disorder. If this thing that you think is wisdom produces disorder, we've got problems. And when he talks about disorder, he means conflict that leads to chaos. Now, there's frequently a conflict between good and bad. That's not what James is talking about here. What he's talking about here is there is a wisdom that produces a chaos. The conflict is chaotic and multifaceted. It feels like society is being pulled apart. It's the kind of disorder that we feel in our own society today. And James says, if disorder is the result of what purports to be wisdom, that wisdom may not actually be wise. He adds finally this fourth warning sign, which is every vile practice. And what James is saying here is that sometimes wisdom sounds like it's starting so good, as if the end that it is calling for is worthy. But then what happens is, in seeking that end, sometimes that end is motivated by the other warning signs that he gives us, by bitterness, by a zeal that's misplaced, by a selfishness, by chaos. And we determine that that end is worth any means necessary to get there. And so, motivated by the wrong things, we choose wrong means. And what James wants us to understand is that when you choose one evil means, you think, I've chosen just one, but the ends justify that means. And James is making the slippery slope argument here. He's saying that when you choose one evil, you don't just choose that one evil, you choose it all. And pretty soon you have every evil, every vile practice. Does your wisdom lead you to embrace one evil after another? Then it's not really wise. In fact, if you go back to verse 15, James helps us to see that what's at stake here is far more than we think. He said, I want you to recognize the wisdom that doesn't come from above, the wisdom instead that is from below. And he tells us what it looks like. He says it's worldly. And by that, he doesn't simply mean that it arises out of the good created order that God has given us. What he means is that it comes from the kingdoms of this world and from a worldly thinking. He says it's not only worldly, but it's unspiritual, meaning that it is not godly, it is not of God, it's not motivated by God or given by God. And he says, in addition to being worldly and unspiritual, it's demonic, meaning that it is from Satan and from that which belongs to Satan, which is opposed to God and seeks to do God damage and harm by hurting us. He says it's worldly, it's from below, it's of this power that is against God. It's not of God, it's trying to harm God, and it's trying to harm God by harming you. He says, if you want to understand what this other so-called wisdom is like, that's what it's like. It's worldly, unspiritual, and demonic. It's definitely not wisdom. It's definitely not wise. There is, though, a wisdom that is truly wise. It's the wisdom from God. And wisdom from God, we find, yields righteousness and peace. In verses 17 and 18, James helps us to recognize this wisdom. He says, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So James is talking about a wisdom from above, and he means a godly wisdom. James picks up this idea that God is above and that we are below, and that God gives good things to us. In James chapter 1, verse 17, we read, every good gift and every perfect gift, the gifts are up there, is from above, from God, coming down from the Father of lights. God is above, God gives good gifts to us. And James says one of the best gifts that God gives to us is his wisdom. In James chapter 1, verse 5, he says, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. Wisdom is a gift. It comes from above. It is given to us by God, and it is given charitably to us. And James helps us to see that godly wisdom produces righteousness. If you're looking again at verse 17, you're going to see that James gives us a list of things that characterize wisdom, the outcomes of it. And he says that there is a purity that comes from wisdom. There is a mercy that comes from wisdom. And there are good fruits that result from wisdom. As we look at that list, we are reminded of Paul the Apostle's fruits of the Spirit. There is something that results, and what it results in is righteousness. We are made right with God, and in being made right with God, it changes us. It changes our character. It changes the way we think, the way we speak, and the way we live. Wisdom from above, wisdom from God, godly wisdom produces righteousness. But he says it also produces peace. He says about this wisdom that it is peace-loving. It's got a gentleness to it. He says it's open to reason, which means that we are willing to listen to others. It is not partial, and it has no hypocrisy in it. James wants us to understand that when we are made right with God, then we inevitably have to be made right with the people around us. So wisdom that is from above, godly wisdom, produces peace. But James also wants us to see that in wisdom, we are constantly sowing and harvesting. We're sowing. We, like farmers, are casting seeds of our words, our actions into the world. And we're harvesting. We are getting things back. What we cast out grows, and we gain a harvest from it. We cast out, we sow a grain of wheat, and the wheat grain grows into plants of wheat, and we get a harvest. We put a little bit of wheat out, and we get a lot of wheat back. And James says we are constantly sowing, we are constantly harvesting. And wisdom teaches us that when we sow, we almost always get back what it is that we've sown. Well, we kind of know what that means when it comes to the natural world. If I sow grains of wheat, I'm not going to harvest avocados. Wouldn't that be great? You sow out a grain of wheat, you're going to get back a harvest of wheat. James helps us to understand as well that when we sow, the harvesting amplifies what we've sown. We sow a grain of wheat. We sow some seeds of wheat. What we get back is a crop, a harvest, a magnified harvest of wheat. And so James is saying, well, if you sow peace and righteousness, then you're going to get back a harvest of peace and righteousness. But this leads us to have to ask ourselves two critically important questions. Question number one is, what am I harvesting? Am I harvesting peace and righteousness? Or am I harvesting in my life, in the world around me, in my network of relationships? Am I harvesting disorder and every vile practice, frustration, bitterness? And as we ask, what are we harvesting, it leads to a second question. And that question is, then what are we sowing? Are we actually sowing peace and righteousness? Or are we sowing bitterness, misplaced passions, selfishness, chaos, and evil? You see, what we harvest is linked to what we sow. And so we don't want to rush past these two questions. What are you harvesting? And linked to it is what you're sowing. You see, it's easy to rush past this and say, well, I know what I'm sowing. I know my motivations. I know my intentions. My intentions are good. I could only be sowing peace and righteousness. But look at your harvest. What are you harvesting? Are you harvesting peace? Are you harvesting righteousness? Or are you harvesting bitterness, chaos, frustration? If you are, go back and ask the question again. What am I sowing? Because godly wisdom, when we embrace it and follow it, tends to yield righteousness and peace. So this leads us to a conclusion today, which is be careful about the wisdom you follow. Be careful about the wisdom that you follow. In applying what James is writing to us today, I want to make 3 suggestions to you. First is select your inputs wisely. We're inundated with inputs. All this information, all these news, all these facts, all these opinions come at us from emails, from blog posts, from videos, from TikTok, from YouTube, from Facebook, from Instagram, from all of the places that we visit, traditional media and social media. And we think that we are out of control of these inputs. We think, well, they're out there, they are coming at me, they must come at me, they will come at me, there's nothing I can do about it. But the fact of the matter is, we are in control of the inputs in our lives. And it's incumbent upon us to exercise that control, to select the inputs that we listen to, that we experience, select them wisely, in godly wisdom. And that means that if an input is filling your life with chaos, with disorder, with evil, with selfish ambition, with bitterness, with jealousy, then it's time to cut that input out of your life. If there is someone who is filling your life, even an important someone in your life, who is filling your life with chaos, disorder, with evil, with bitterness, with jealousy, with selfishness, you have the right and the ability to exercise a mute button on that person's input into your life. And when it comes to our children, if our children are coming home and their lives are filled with inputs that are false, that are wrong narratives, that are teaching them chaos, that are bringing disorder, that are leading them to bitterness and selfishness, to jealousy, then we have the right, the responsibility at a bare minimum to help our children process and understand those inputs in light of the gospel. And we have the right and the ability to make choices to change the inputs that they're experiencing. Select your inputs wisely. But it's not just about what comes at us. We also have to exercise wisdom when it comes to our zeal. Edit your zeal wisely. Because you see, we're quick to say, other zeals are wrong, my zeal is right. But we have to ask, James gives us a question to consider. What does your zeal produce? Does your zeal produce bitterness? Does it do damage to you and make you bitter? Does it do damage to others and make them bitter? James says, be very careful about that kind of zeal. That sounds not like a righteous zeal, but a bitter jealousy. And James would affirm 100% the concept that there is meant to be one and only one zeal in our lives, and it is the zeal for God. God is jealous of our zeal, and he would have our zeal for himself and for no other. So edit your zeal wisely. So we look at the inputs, we look at the condition of our heart, but then we ask about the outputs. And here I would say, filter your words wisely. Filter your words wisely. James comes back to this topic over and over again because it is so important. And we say to ourselves and to one another, well, words don't really mean anything. Words don't do any damage. But the simple fact of the matter is that words are powerful. Of course, words impact others. Please understand why. Because our thoughts turn into our words, and our words turn into our actions. Our words are powerful. So filter, choose, select your words wisely, in person and online. Filter your words wisely. You see, as we think about this wisdom that is from above, godly wisdom, Jesus shows us what godly wisdom from above looks like. Jesus is that one who is from above. And he shows us that even though he is from above, he comes to us to be with us. That's what godly wisdom looks like. Jesus coming to us. Even though he is the Son of God, he comes to us. That's godly wisdom. Godly wisdom, wisdom that is from above, we see in Jesus, we see in the cross. Because in the cross, Jesus shows us that godly wisdom, it embraces sacrifice. On the cross, we see that godly wisdom shows us that Jesus takes on our sin and dies on the cross to pay the price for our sin. That's the wisdom of the cross. That's the wisdom of Jesus. That's godly wisdom from above. We see, though, in the resurrection, the outcome of godly wisdom. Jesus isn't defeated by death, but he rises from the dead, victorious over death. God overturns the sentence of death. That's what godly wisdom looks like. It doesn't end in death, it ends in life. You see, godly wisdom leads to life. That's the wisdom of God, the wisdom from above, the wisdom that we see in Jesus. So choose Jesus' wisdom. It means rejecting the wisdom of the world, the wisdom that is from below, everything that belongs to it, and everything that results from it. It means embracing instead the wisdom that is from above, the wisdom of Jesus, the wisdom that leads to righteousness and peace. That's how faith works.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Valley Avon podcast. If you would like to hear more, you can subscribe for free on any platform you use. If you would like to visit us in person or would like to submit a prayer request, you can visit us on the web at avon.valleycommunity.cc. From all of us here at Valley Community Baptist Church, thank you for coming and have a blessed week.